Tonight's reading comes from the Old Testament, Proverbs chapter 17, verse 17, and chapter 27, verses 9 and 17. A friend is always loyal, and a brother is born to help in time of need. The heartfelt counsel of a friend is as sweet as perfume and incense. As iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. Here ends tonight's reading.
All right. Hey, give it up for our Bible reader one more time as she walks across there you go. Awesome. There's a lot of people in this room. It's kind of scary to get up here on stage and do things like that. So awesome. Thank you, Carly. Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Andy. I'm one of the pastors here at Lutheran Church of Hope, and it is awesome to be here with you all. Thanks for coming tonight. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm glad that I get to be here. We're excited for a whole bunch of reasons. One of the reasons I'm excited, they only let me come to Power Life like once a year. So we're going to have fun tonight. I hope you guys are excited to be here as well. One of the other reasons I'm excited here is because we're starting a new series tonight, and we're talking about something that absolutely, depending upon how you do it, how you handle it, the decisions you make, the direction you go, will have a massive impact on your life. I'm not just talking about relationships and goals, but we're talking about friendships tonight. We're talking about relationships and the kind of relationships we have with people that we call friends. I have obviously, been thinking about it a lot this week and kind of preparing to talk to you guys, and there's a number of things that have come to mind. There's so much that we could talk about, but I kind of want to make this simple for us tonight. And so we're going to look at the ways that God is a friend to us and use that as our example. But first, I just want to take a little bit of a poll this evening. And I just want to make sure that what we're about to talk about with you tonight is relevant, okay? So do me a favor. If you have a friend, raise your hand tonight. How many of you have at least one friend? Some of you do not have your hands up, and I am a little concerned, right? Yes, awesome, hands down. All right, how many of you wish that you had more friends? Anybody? Right? I think about, even in my own life, there are times, awesome, you can put your hands down. There are times in my own life where I think, well, awesome, right? Like, it's great to have people to connect with, but there's like, I don't know, it just feels like, and especially when I think about junior high, my experience in middle school and junior high, and even high school, honestly, very often I found myself surrounded by people, right? But one of the things that was really challenging and frustrating was whether or not I felt like I was surrounded by people, but I was also like, man, would anybody even notice me if I was gone, right? If anybody even noticed me if I just like disappeared, or what if I moved away or whatever, like would anybody even care? I was surrounded by people, and yet I felt lonely at times. And I'm guessing that many of us in this room have had moments in our life. Maybe you're having one of those moments tonight. And so because we want to talk about that, we want to dig into friends. Just a couple more questions, though. How many of you would say you have good friends? You have people that like are actually helpful in your life, and you feel like they're actually like, you're glad that they are your friend. All right, awesome. Some of you. Show of hands tonight. How many of us have weird friends, right? Like people that we do not understand, people that get kind of on our nerves, right? People are just weird. They just like weird stuff and whatever. Awesome. All right. Well, this all matters. It all matters, and what we're talking about tonight is relevant because you're in the midst of this, right? And here's what I know about friendship. This is really important. The way you go about this, right? The friends that you choose, I believe they bring an incredible opportunity. They have the power, and you have the power, right? They have the power to shape you, to help mold you, to help you become the person that you have been created to become, right? And likewise, right? You have the power, honestly, and you can decide, are you gonna steer them in a good way, or are you gonna steer them in a bad way, right? You have way more power than you understand in your friends' lives. And so I think this is really important. I'm really glad that you guys are getting a chance to talk about this tonight, because the way we treat our friendship says a lot about who we are, and it says a lot about the story that we're going to live as we continue to live and live into our lives. So we're talking about friendship tonight. As we do this, I want to go all the way back to the beginning. Genesis chapter 1, if you got a Bible, and I'm hoping you brought your Bible tonight, flip it open, Genesis chapter 1. Do you guys know where that is? It's like the first page, right? Cool. Genesis chapter 1. Get it open and circle this verse, number 26. Because this verse is just a few words, but it tells you it tells you so much about who you are and what God's plan for your life is and the way that you've been designed, okay? So Genesis chapter 1, the creation story, you probably know this, right? God in the first 5 days creates the earth and the seas and the stars and the sky and does all these things. But then there's a conversation. And I don't even understand this because God is literally talking to himself in the first book of the Bible, right? The first chapter of the first book of the Bible. And this is what God says to himself. He says, let us make human beings in our image. And this is weird to me, right? Because God, I've always thought in the creation story, like God created by himself, right? So then who's the we, right? Who's the our image? Why didn't he say my image? Well, it's because, and if you look closer at the chapter, right, at creation, God was there, but also God in three persons was there. John chapter 1 says that Jesus was there, and Genesis chapter 1 says that the Spirit and God the Father were there. Right? And so what this tells us is that God, wherever God goes, though he's three in one. Right? And what this really tells us is that wherever God is, he has his friends with him. All right? Now, how many of you think that would be awesome to have your friends with you 24/7, 365, right? Like when you're at home and you're doing your homework, like your friends are always there, right? You can help each other, you can make each other laugh, like get through the boring parts, whatever it is, right? Obviously, like when you go to school or you go to your, whatever it is that you have to do to run errands with your parents, whatever it is, right? You're always going to have friends with you, right? Like when you have to go to the bathroom, like, oh, wait, no, that'd be awkward, right? No. It would be interesting, right? Having your friends with you all the time. But this is who God is. And what I want us to understand tonight is this, you are made in the image of God, all right? And what this really means is that you are like God in a whole bunch of ways. God cares about a lot of things that you care about, right? You have been designed to be a lot like God, not exactly like God, thank goodness, but you are like God in a whole bunch of different ways, and God is always with his friends. So what this tells us is, right, that you and I, that we've been created for friendship. We've been created to have friends. So if people ever try and tell you, right, like, oh, your friends aren't that important, you could say, actually, they are. God created me to have friends, right? If you ever find yourself, you know what, forget those people. I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna be my own person and I'm just gonna do life by myself. Like I don't want anybody to know who I am or what I'm up. I'm not gonna let them into my life, right? You were not created to live that way. You were actually created to have really good friendships. You were created for friendship. And Solomon understood this, one of the smartest guys ever lived, wrote a few books of the Bible, right? This is what he says. He says, two people are better off than one, right? Duh. Life is more fun with other people. But then he says, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. And this makes sense, right? Like if you're working on your homework and you don't understand it, right? And half time, right, as parents, we're not that helpful. So it's nice to be able to reach out to a friend who was in the class and say, like, do you understand this homework? Right? It's easier when we have other people in our life, but there's something deeper here. And we just heard this verse beautifully read. As iron sharpens iron, Solomon also says in the book of Proverbs, as iron sharpens iron, right? So a friend sharpens a friend. Now, this may not make sense to you. Like, what do you mean? Like iron, like the ironing board I use to like get the wrinkles out of my clothes? Is that what I'm supposed to, like, what is this verse about? Have you guys ever seen like the Japanese steakhouse? You ever seen like on TV or maybe your parents taking out to eat to like the steakhouse where they like cook all the food right in front of you and where they get out the knives and before they start cutting up the meat to serve it to you, they go like this, they go, they rub like the knives against each other to make them sharp. Okay, like none of you. Awesome. Well, okay, you should do that. You should say, yeah, I want they do that to make the knife sharp because they're going to be more effective. Here's what you should do tonight. Okay, when you go home, your parents probably have all the knives like in your kitchen. They probably have them like in a block, like a wood block on the counter. You should just go and you should just pull out a knife and start looking at it and say, Pastor Andy told me to look at this, right? Like that's going to freak your parents out. So, all right. But in the knife block that I have in my kitchen, there's a few different knives for doing different things with food or whatever. You know what else is in there? Like a piece of iron, like a piece of metal that's got ridges in it that's designed. When I rub a knife blade along it, right? It molds and it shapes and it influences that iron of that knife. It makes a finer point. It sharpens it. It makes it better. It makes it better at doing what it was designed to do. And this is where I don't think you guys fully understand. Like you have incredible power. You have incredible opportunity when it comes to influencing your friends because this is the way that God has designed us, not only to be in friendships, but to sharpen one another. And so again, a reminder, right, that you and I have been created for friendship. And you probably understand this, right? You know that friends are going to be a part of your life, but here's something you probably also know, right? But there's a challenge to it. Who in this room has ever had a moment where a friend was a jerk to them, right? Like anybody? Have you ever just had a moment where you're just like, man, if I didn't love Jesus, I would just punch you in the face right now, right? Some of you are probably thinking that tonight as you're sitting here amongst your friends. There's a challenge to it, right? Because here's one of the things that we know about relationships as well. We understand that friendships can be painful, right? I think about friendship is clearly given from God because on the one hand, our friends can give us the highest of highs, right? They can take us to the mountaintop experiences of life, and then just a few minutes later, they can take us into the deepest valley, right? The lowest of lows, right? Friendships can be painful, and I think about the times, right, where I've been ditched. I think about some of the things that some of my so-called friends have said behind my back, right? It's brutal. It is brutal. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about because you've experienced this, right? Friendships can be painful. But not only that, right? One of the other challenges that comes is having the right friends. Like, not everybody's going to be your best friend. And here's newsflash, not everybody needs to be your best friend. I want you to look at these circles out here, right? This is some research that says we need some people in our close circle, like 1 to 3 people, right? But we have this like little bit larger group of friends, and then we have like the 13 to 70, like even larger group of friends, like the people that we kind of know. But you know, when you're walking in the hall at school, you're like, hey, like you know each other, right? But you don't really know each other, like you never spend time with them. Like even those kinds of friendships are really important for us, actually. And we need all those things, right? So there's challenges. It's like how do we do this? In fact, that is the question that we're talking about tonight. And luckily for all of us, right, the Bible has something to say, right? How do we do friendships? I can tell you, the 6th graders tonight, there's like 4 boys right over here in this section in the 6th grade talk tonight, and they were like screaming at each other during one of the worship songs, like, the Chiefs are better. And the other guy was like, the Jacksonville Jaguars are better. And I'm like, they're not even in the playoffs. Like, what are you talking about, right? But these guys were like, I seriously was like, oh my gosh, is a fight going to break out of Power Life? Like, this is crazy, right? That is not how you do friendships. So how do you do friendships? I want to give you a really simple answer to this question, okay? How do you do friendships? And it comes from this verse, John chapter 13. This is what Jesus says on his last night with his friends, which some of you are not even listening to me. That's awesome, right? This is what Jesus says on his last night when he is with his best friends, actually, right? He's about to go and he's about to die for them. Like, you wonder if your friends are good, if you have good friends, like, are your friends willing to go and die for you? And he goes, and I think he's like, it's intense. And so he spends his last night with his disciples, and he gives them, you know, his best friends, he gives them some instructions. This is what he says. He says, just as I have loved you, you should love each other, right? Just as I have loved you, Jesus says. Another way you could think about this is just as I have been a great friend to you. And we read the Bible, Jesus was an incredible friend. Just as I've been a great friend to you, you should be a great friend to each other. And so he's saying, follow my example, right? Jesus is saying, if you want to be a great friend, do what I did. Okay, repeat after me. Do what Jesus did. Right? If you want to be a great friend, you need to do what Jesus did. Right? Do what Jesus did. This begs the question, right? If Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you, well then here's the question. How has God loved you? Right? And you probably know the Sunday school answers, right? Like, oh, Jesus died on the cross for me. Jesus forgave my sins, right? But in your own life right now, you guys are going to be writing your faith stories if you haven't started already. Right? You're going to be asked to come up. Are there moments in your life where you felt God's love? Where you had a moment where you're like, wow, this God thing is for real. Like I believe this stuff. Is there a moment where you felt God's forgiveness? Is there a moment where God has shown up in your life? That's important. And so what I want to do with just a couple minutes that I have left is just give you guys just a quick picture. And you have your own answers to this, actually. This is one of the questions you should talk about in your small group. How has God loved you? Whatever it is that God does for you, I guarantee you if you turn around and do that to your friends, you're going to have more friends than you know what to do with. And not only that, you're going to have incredible joy and you're going to have incredible support, and you're going to have what you need to be able to make it through life. How has God loved you? Here's some things I know about God. God shows up. Right? You think about the conversation that God must have had with Jesus in heaven when Adam and Eve, right? When humans screwed everything up. Do you think God said, oh, look at those poor people down there? And you're like, whoop, see you suckers, good luck, right? I mean, does God say, have fun in hell? No. No, what does God do instead? He gets to work, right? When Jesus is walking through this life, when he gets word that his friend Lazarus is very sick, in fact, that he's about to die, does Jesus say, well, I guess it's too bad for him? Or does Jesus do something else? In fact, does he come to his friend's side? God shows up. You and I are called to do the same. And I actually had an example this week. I love when I'm teaching on something and then something happens. Right? I had a friend late last week actually who texted me, and he just wrote these words like, he wrote, dude, I just lost my job. I just got fired. Right? And I was like, oh my gosh, I got to call my friend, right? I didn't just delete his text. I didn't ghost him, right? I was like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. How are you doing? And he's like, not good. I was like, okay, that probably means a phone call. So I call him and we start talking, right? And he's like, he couldn't really talk very well because he was actually kind of freaking out. I don't know if you've ever had a moment where your friends get a hold of you and they are freaking out. Right? Do you just walk away from them or do you respond? So I did what any good friend would do with my friend. I called him. I was like, hey, I'm going to come see you in a little bit. Okay, so I went to Bebop's. Who doesn't love Bebop's, right? Maybe that's just me. Yep. And I got the biggest shake that I could get at Bebop's, and I ran it over to him. And I said, man, I am so sorry, right? Here's a shake. Is that what a good friend does? Absolutely, because friends show up, because God shows up for us, we're able to show up for other people. There's a whole bunch of these, and we don't have time to go through all these tonight, right? But here's what I know. God loves us for who we are, right? Not what we're good at. God doesn't love you because you're good at sports, right? Some of us, we have friends that like us because of what we have, what we're good at, what we're popular, whatever it is, right? But real friends, they love us for who we are. They don't ask us to do things we don't want to do to be able to fit in with them. Right? Real friends love us who we are because that's the way that God loves us. Real friends believe in us because God believes in us. Time and time again in the Bible, right? We see that Jesus' disciples, he's hanging out with his best friends and he's challenging them to go do things that are out of their comfort zone, and they crash and burn, right? Like they make huge mistakes. But at the end of the day, God doesn't give up on them, right? Jesus doesn't give up on them because he believes in us. He believes in them. We're called not to give up on our friends, right? God builds up. He builds people up, and you and I are asked to do that. God reminds us of the truth, right? He allows us to see who we are and encourages us in the midst of the challenges that we face. God forgives, right? I hope you understand this, that on the cross, even as Jesus was being killed, did he get angry at people? No, he forgave them. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. And you and I are called to do the same, even when it's hard, right? You want to be a great friend, find a way to work through the tough parts of relationship. In fact, sometimes, right, and adults do this all the time, we quit relationships when they get hard, when in reality, I don't know that you've even experienced like the full depth, right, of the best possible friendship if you haven't been through an argument with somebody. Conflict is actually a way that we grow relationships when we handle it the right way. And this is, again, we got to follow God's lead here, right? God forgives. God serves. We see this time and time again in the Bible, but perhaps most importantly, God saves, right? God saves us. This is what he says in John 15. Jesus says, there's no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. And you and I both know that that's what Jesus did. He laid down his life for his friends. Now, do not go home to your parents tonight and say, Pastor Andy told me I'm supposed to die on a cross because I'm supposed to literally do what Jesus did, okay, for my friends. Is that cool? Like, don't say that to your parents, okay? But what does it look like for you to lay your life down in the sense to give something up? What does it look like to sacrifice, right? To be there for your friends. One of the scariest moments of my life, I was, my son, this is my son Callan, he's a 5th grader now. This is a few years ago. but he had a swallowing issue where, you know, like you ever had water going down the wrong pipe and you kind of cough on it, like, and you choke a little bit? That was like every swallow, my son did that. And so I figured out that I had been basically kind of drowning him over the first few years of his life. It was really hard. And so he went and he had this surgery, and the surgery is awesome, except they were going to like remove some organs inside of him, and they were going to move his aorta, which is like this vessel that carries like all of your blood to your brain. And they were going to move his windpipe over a little bit, and then they were going to stitch these things together because his windpipe like wasn't very strong. Right? And so I'm like, wait a minute, you're going to put a needle into my son's aorta. I'm like, he's going to sneeze and like die in a soccer game because he's bleeding, right? I mean, like they're going to open him up and whatever, right? So as he goes into the surgery, like I'm in the hospital with the waiting room, and I am the one freaking out. And I'm sitting there, and I get this call from one of my friends, and it was my friend Adam. These are some of his kids, him and his wife. They called us on their phone, and they're like, hey, how are you doing? I'm like, are you serious? I'm freaking out right now. And they're like, yeah, we thought you might. That's why we're coming to see you. And I'm like, what? You live in Des Moines. We're in Iowa City. It's a 2-hour drive. Like, you don't have to do that. And they're like, too bad. We knew you would say that, right? And this is how I know they're good friends. This is how you know you have good friends. Because they know what you need before you even know that you need it. And my friends, they said, we're going to be there in an hour. And they came. We had a great time. We ate crappy hospital food, and we loved it. It was laughing. Like, my son actually felt pretty good. And not only that, they brought him an incredible Hulk coloring book, right? Only your best friends do stuff like that. And we had the best time in this hospital. And what ended up happening in that moment is they took a really hard, really awful, freak out kind of situation, and they made it okay. Like, they helped us get through it. Because they're good friends, because they did what good friends do. They do what God has done for us. They showed up. And so you're going to have a moment, I guarantee you, this week. You're probably going to have a moment this week where one of your friends is going to be in a tough spot, and you have a choice to make. Am I going to be a good friend? Am I going to do what Jesus did? Or am I going to do something else? And so the question I want to leave you with, right, is who shows up for you? But perhaps more importantly, who is it this week that you need to show up for? Think about this, guys, and have a great time at your small group. Get a life!
Hey, feeling good, like I should. When in dark, walk